Sound check, everything good? All right. So we get to see the final plagues against Egypt. And I just want to say too is that it's not that God made Pharaoh's heart hardened. He didn't go out and just make his heart hard. God allowed what was already there. He was already dispossessed against Israel and his anti-Semitism. And that's what we see in this world today, because Egypt represents the world, even our world today, okay? Where everybody is looking towards government for all the answers. It's the same thing as the people in Egypt looking towards Pharaoh for all their answers, right? Pharaoh was put on a pedestal by himself and by others as a god, right? A Horus or one of the other gods, right? Incarnate, right? And today we see people doing the same thing with government. Government. Give us money. Give us health insurance. Give us jobs. The government, that's not the job of the government. Okay? The job of the government, God put the governments here for a purpose, to keep law and order, to help promote peace in our land and stuff, in order for us to create jobs and business. And as it says in our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution stuff, for us to be prosperous, for us to trying to remember what the word is that they used, but be peaceful, huh? Prosper, but I think there was something else that we, and the main thing is that that's what the government is for. And also the thing is, the government doesn't give us our rights, just so people understand that. The Constitution doesn't give us our rights. The Constitution protects our rights from the government. Our rights come from God, period. And I know I hear people say that the government can take our rights away. All they can do is hinder those rights. And we've seen that in many countries. We see going on in Canada right now. We see in Europe and other countries. The communist countries specifically are very idolatrous in that they worship the government by far. Socialist governments are about the same thing. We rely on the government for our well-being, and we shouldn't be. We should be relying on God. The governments are like idols, and the ones who run the government are like the priests of those idols, like the priests of Baal or any of the others. And we need to realize that that's who they are, and we need to put more of our trust in the God of heaven, in the God of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And what we see here is that God is judging not just Egypt, but the gods of Egypt. And that's what we're going to see. That's what we're starting to see here in these last days too, is that we're going to see a pouring out of these same type of plagues on the earth, on the people who reject God, on the people. And God's going to do the same thing he did with Israel. Now we'll see some of the stuff, maybe even experience some of this stuff at first, but then he's going to separate his people, those who truly love him and walk in his ways, etc., right? And we'll watch things going on. We're going to be a light. Just like as we see there was darkness over Egypt. First off, there's a locust, right? Locusts are destructive and a bad plague. And we're also going to see the same thing in these last days. I don't think they're going to, people say helicopter, stuff like that. I don't think they're going to be helicopters. I think they're going to be something more monstrosity that we haven't seen yet, It's going to be something terrible. And it's going to only go after those who do not have the sign of God on them, right? That's what it says. And that's interesting about this, is that what we see here is that they destroy whatever is left of the green, of the plants, of the edible food and stuff for the Egyptians. This is a life and death thing, And that's why Pharaoh was so concerned about it, bringing them in there. But of course, his hatred towards the Jews just allows himself to continue to not allow Israel to leave. And God knew this. He already knew it was there, and it's already in Pharaoh's heart. So that God can bring about these mighty things and show us what's yet to come, right? What's coming in our days too, things that are similar. And then there was darkness. It was darkness that could be felt. And I want you to know that this darkness was a spiritual darkness, a heaviness, of evil. They couldn't see each other. They couldn't walk. They couldn't, because it was so heavy. The evil was so heavy, and we're seeing that even in our country. It doesn't really have to be a darkness that the sun isn't shining, stuff like that, but that it's a spiritual darkness. And we're seeing that around the world, that the countries are having a spiritual darkness. I loved yesterday, the Right for Life march yesterday. Had a huge number of people, record number of people partook in it, and it was mostly young people. Mostly young people, teens and 20s, and that's awesome. The only thing I didn't like about it was that they had one group carrying a huge idol of Jesus, and that's an idol. I'm sorry to say it, but it is an idol. He didn't even know what he looks like, yet they're carrying this thing. But anyways, the thing is that they're standing for life. And it's important that we stand for life, that we pray for our young people, that they do not be deceived by the spirit of communism, socialism, left-wing policies, wokeness, the evil propaganda that is out there, but that they come to know the one true God by God's word, that we can be a witness for that, and pray for our grandchildren especially, because our children, our grandchildren, because they're the ones who are coming up and going to be the ones who help change the world. I also believe there's an interesting thing too, is that like the two witnesses, we've talked about this before, is that, it's going to be Enoch and Elijah. But one person brought up, could it be two countries? Could it be the U.S. and Israel? It could be. I'm not saying it is. I think if the United States, with our current president, who is trying to make our country a godly country again, and the adversary really hates that. That's why we see all these evil people and stuff protesting and going after law enforcement and stuff like that. I'm sorry, they're being ruled by evil. They have no passion for other people. Matter of fact, we're finding out now that the majority of them are being paid to be there. They don't care about it. They're just getting there for a paycheck. And several of them have even admitted that they're being paid. That's evil. That's horrible. And to be honest with you, I believe that if they are getting paid, that they should be arrested as traitors and face the ultimate punishment for that. And anybody who stands with them is a traitor. Our country is founded on Christian Judeo beliefs, on the Bible and stuff. It wasn't meant to be necessarily a Christian nation, but a nation that was built upon the moral standings of the Bible, of what God has taught us. And also that it's not one religion to rule over all the others. It was for freedom of religion, for everybody to be a part of that, and not be a litmus test to be able to be elected into government, right? And we need to understand that. But in Egypt, they worship Pharaoh as a god. His pride is that of a god. And we see that in this country and other countries, that the government, people pride themselves in our government, giving away our money to people who don't even live here, who don't even belong here, who haven't come here in the right, proper way. There is an order. And to allow people to come into our country illegally, I'm sorry to say, is to cause chaos, and it causes disaster. People wonder why our wages are so low. It's because companies are hiring them at a much lower wage. And so, and also, it's come out, how is law enforcement finding a lot of these people? Because they're getting Medicare and Medicaid and welfare, which the Democrats, I'm sorry to say, said, oh no, they're not doing it. Well, now we're finding out that there's huge roles, especially here in Minnesota, that they're able to find them because they are receiving these things. That's fraud. Our government has frauded the people of Minnesota, have taken taxpayers' money, given it to people who shouldn't even be here, many of whom, they've arrested over 10,000 illegals. Of those 10,000, almost every one has a criminal background in rape, murder, drug charges, pedophilia, all kinds of things. And yet the left is standing up for them, saying, oh, they have a right to whatever, I seen a meme on Facebook. Haven't been on Facebook that much, but it shows on the top gangbangers, and it says, why is the left protecting these people? And then it shows a bunch of children on the bottom, but allowing them to die. And we really need to take a look at that. A society, and I like what the Pope had to say too, a society that protects the innocent is a blessed nation. I can't remember exactly the quote, but basically saying that a country that that is protecting the innocent, the weak, is a godly country. Okay, I'm kind of paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly the right words he said, but it's true. And that's how God looks at every nation. God looks at a country, if it's protecting its most vulnerable people, then there's a blessing from God on that country. And for a long time, our country was out destroying those innocent lives and stuff. I mean, it's still going on, but not like it was before. We still need to put an end to it. And I know I hear people say, well, it's not in the Bible. No, it may not be word for word in the Bible, but the thing is, it is in there. If you take a look, God has already said, do not murder. It doesn't say do not kill. It says do not murder, right? The word kill and the word murder in Hebrew are two different words and two different meanings. To murder is to do it intentionally for no good reason, basically. Doesn't matter what your reasoning is. To set up somebody to try and kill them for whatever it might be. But killing has to do with military, self-preservation, self-defense, those type of things. Or if somebody has broken the law and they get the death penalty, that's allowed. But murder is something that comes out of the heart. To even tell your brother that you hate him, Yeshua even said, is murder. To spread rumors about people is considered murder, because especially if they're not true, you can destroy that person's life, his income, and even to the point where some people even take their lives. That's murder, right? So we've got to understand that stuff, which we're going to talk about later as we get into this further. We have the 10 utterances that are coming up. Yes, 10 utterances versus 10 commandments. I know the church calls them the 10 commandments, but they're not necessarily commandments. They're the utterances of God. And they always divide the second commandment into two and forget the first one. Or sometimes they'll divide the 10th commandment into two as well. It's just not, and they're not. They're utterances. That's even what it says in the Hebrew, the 10 utterances. Okay? But when we're looking at this, we see that now is the final plague, the 10th plague. 10 is the number for judgment. There was 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and then there was judgment, and people died, right? We see that. There was 10 generations from Noah to Abraham, but God found in Abraham what he was looking for. A man who would raise his children in the way of God, to be a light to the nations, a light to the world, and to bring the Messiah. Okay? And so instead of being death, he blessed Abraham and his descendants to bring that light to us, which we have today. Without Israel, there would be no Messiah. And then now we see here again 10 plagues. The 10th one, death of the firstborn, right? And the firstborn could be any type of thing. And here, of course, we see it's the firstborn male of both men and animals, right? And that's why we see later where God says, the firstborn of every animal and every person belong to me, right? So we see that. That's why. But the death is the destruction that's coming on this world. We see that in Revelation that, there's going to be some calamities that come on this world that is going to cause a third of the population to be destroyed, another third to be destroyed, and so forth, all the way down to, and it's all having to do with wicked people, with the wickedness that is in this earth. So it's going to become like the days of Noah. People don't care about God's instructions. They just care about their own selfish needs and desires, right? And we see that. Now, the United States has been a great country when it comes to helping other countries. And I hear people say, oh, yeah, it's because they're trying to make them into America. What's wrong with that? In America, we have freedom. We have opportunities like no other country has ever had. We learn from our mistakes and we grow and we get better. But then we have people who want us to go backwards, want us to go back to the caveman times when there was no law and stuff like that, right? That's basically what the other side is all about. The other side has always been about, they fought a war for slavery, the Civil War. I don't hear people say, oh, it was about states' rights. No, it wasn't. Sorry, I say that. It was about the rights of those slaves, human beings. That's what it was about our nation rising above the barbarity of slavery. And those who wanted to keep it tried to fight, and of course they lost. Thank God. But that same group of people is still here. They're the ones who created the Ku Klux Klan. They're the same people who have created the neo-Nazis and other groups like that. And I'll tell you what, the neo-Nazis aren't on the right. They're not a right-wing group. They never have been. They're just right of the communists. That's what they are. They're all on the left, okay? Dictators, fascists and stuff like that have always been on the left. Have always been on the left. You look through the history and you find out that's where they are. The only reason that the Nazis got moved to the right as a right-wing thing is because the liberals didn't want to accept them. They didn't want that part of history. Well, sorry to say it, but they've always been on the left. They were just right of the communists, that's all. And people need to understand that. Look at your history. Anything that's socialist is on the left, and they were socialists. And they were national socialists, so their main thing was their country. Communist is a global socialism, and both are horrible. Both are anti-God, anti-Torah, anti-human beings, human rights, trying to control everybody's lives, trying to subject everybody to what they want. And that's the thing, you can have your opinions, and I just want people to know that you can have your opinions, whether right or wrong, but you can't force people to believe what you believe. Then that becomes fascism, okay? And we need to understand that, that's what fascism is. You can't use violence to try and make people to believe or accept what you have to believe. You can't call people names just because they disagree. People have a right to disagree. I don't care if you show them proof or whatever. They still have a right to take that proof and say, no, I don't believe it. You can't force it on them. And I just want people to understand that, because we go through this. We've got this going on in our country, in our families, and it's okay to disagree. For a long time, and I still have friends who don't agree with me on stuff, or very, very much don't agree with me on stuff. But you know what? We're still friends. We still get together for coffee. We still get together and talk and things like that. And we primarily just stay away from that stuff, because it's not about that. It's about us and our friendship. That's what makes it good. And even though we may disagree on stuff, so what? There's stuff we do agree on. And that's what we should be looking at, is the things that we do agree on, right? That's what we should be doing. And so we see even with Moses, he had people who disagreed with him, right? Even up to the point we see them going through the desert and stuff. all the miracles that took place, God feeding them manna and stuff like that, and you still have people who are blind. And sorry to say that, but that's what we have today too. Was it yesterday that they had that boycott or walkout or whatever for the protest ICE? You had several pastors and religious leaders arrested for supporting that, right? Good. Let them go to jail for being stupid, because that's what they are, stupid. They're ignorant. They have no idea what they're doing. All they are for is to get the praise of people. They're definitely not on God's side. And I'll tell you that right now. And I want people to understand that. I mean, I love everybody. I don't care what your belief is or what your lifestyle is. I treat everybody the way that I would want to be treated. Okay? And that's what we're supposed to. Hillel gave us that. Yeshua reiterated it. To love ourselves, love our neighbors as ourselves, to do to others as we want them to do to us. Whatever you don't like, don't do to others, right? That's what we should be like. And there's a difference between taking care of our poor and stuff like that and the needy versus those who are coming into the country illegally. I'm saying we still need to be compassionate for them, but they need to come in the right way. And yes, I do believe that our system needs to be changed. It's always been a bad system. And the Franklin Delano Roosevelt and those with him really exploited that during World War II, not allowing the Jews from Germany and stuff to immigrate here, even though they were under threat of life and stuff. They refused to let them. Because, we can't have that. But they let other people come. They let Germans migrate to the United States. Yeah, to escape that probably, but they wouldn't let the Jews. If you were Jewish, you weren't allowed to come. And not only that, but then he also put the Japanese in internment camps. Japanese Americans. Put them in internment camps. Why? Because of their racism, their evil ideology. And we got to realize that same group of people is here today. They want us to go back to Jim Crow. They want us to go back to people being slaves of the government now, not just black people, which is too bad, but, because we don't want anybody to be slaves, but they want everybody to become slaves of the government, that you rely on the government, just like what Daniel had to go through. Yes? Yep. George Washington warned people about political parties, and that's our issue. That's our big problem. But anyways, the thing is that Daniel had to face this same type of thing where people in the government got jealous of him because the king really liked him and he listened to him, right? But they also they said, oh, hey, look, he doesn't worship our king. He doesn't worship our government. So we're going to make us so that the king will bring this up and have him make a law saying that for so many days, you're not allowed to pray to your God, only ask the king for everything, right? And so Daniel had to go through that too. And Daniel, he did it anyway. He prayed 3 times a day to God. And God delivered him from that group of idolaters. And that's what we need to understand today, is that we still need to continue to walk in God and know that we're not here to please man. We're here to please God. We're here to do his will. Even if we disagree with the people that are, whatever they're doing, it doesn't mean we hate them. We need to show them what's right by showing them our love, treating people the way we want to be treated, right? And not worshiping the government or the things that come with the government, right? We need to worship God. God is the only one. And you see this with God bringing this final judgment on Egypt, death of the firstborn. And finally, because of it, Pharaoh's own son, his heir, is killed. It dies in this, right? So remember, from the beginning of this, at the time of Joseph, or during the time of Joseph, towards the end of there and stuff, that Egypt did have a legal right to Israel, to making them slaves, okay? Because they were They were there as sojourners, not as citizens, right? And they were given special privileges and stuff. And the Egyptians finally got tired of it. The new Pharaoh that came in made laws against that and even made them into slaves, right? So kind of what we see here. And so Egypt had a right to that. Israel today, not saying it was right for them to do that, shouldn't have been, because they were welcomed into Egypt by the Pharaoh, the other Pharaoh before this, right? And other pharaohs. And the Egyptians loved them, but they used it against Israel. And that's what we have seen today. Now, Israel, the state of Israel has been reborn again, was born out of fire, just as the prophets said would happen. And we see it now. So all the stuff from before about Yeshua coming and stuff like that, and couldn't happen until Israel was made a nation again. Even Yeshua said that. When you see Israel become a nation again, know that the time is short, right? And so we do know that the time is short. And these plagues and stuff that are coming on the world, the final one is a bad one. And finally, that's when the end will come. That's when the Messiah will gather his army. And that's the other thing too. When we see here, it says, it's talking about divisions. The word there in Hebrew is actually army. God is gathering his army, okay? And Yeshua is going to gather his army, not just as we say, people, but his army. And his army are those who love God and keep his commandments, both Jew or Gentile. Because we do see that when Israel left, they left with a mixed company. And we reiterate this too, because God has never kept it separate from the Gentiles. He even says, and that's what we're reading here too, about the Passover, right? Let's see, where is it at? No foreigner is to eat. Okay. Adonai said to Moshe and Aharon, this is the regulation for the Pesach lamb. No foreigner is to eat it. The foreigner means someone who has not, I'll tell you right now, is someone who has not put their trust in God, who has not, in this sense, accepted Yeshua, that he is the Messiah, okay? That they haven't put their trust in God's word, the Torah, okay? But if anyone has a slave he bought for money, when you have circumcised him, he may eat it. Neither a traveler nor a hired servant may eat it. It is to be eaten in one house. You are not to take any of the meat outside the house, and you are not to break any of its bones. The whole community of Israel is to keep it. If a foreigner staying with you wants to observe Adonai's Pesach, Passover, all his males must be circumcised. Okay, and in this sense, it's talking about a physical circumcision, but in reality, it's talking about a spiritual circumcision. Okay? Now, today when we do Passover, we do our Seders. It's fine for those who aren't circumcised or even whatever, physically or spiritually, to be part of it, take part of it, right? It's part of the light to be shown to them, right? Because we're not eating the Passover lamb. There's no temple right now. The Passover lamb was an offering that had to be done in Jerusalem at the temple. Because there is no temple, most Jewish people do not eat lamb at Passover. One reason is not to put a stumbling block before others, thinking that it's the offering. Well, it's not. It's just meat. It's just part of the food if you do it, okay? But we do it as a remembrance of this offering, right? But, okay, be circumcised. Then he may take part and observe it, and he will be like a citizen of the land. But no uncircumcised person is to eat it. The same teaching is to apply equally to the citizen and to the foreigner living among you. And that's an important thing to understand, is that a Gentile, and these Gentiles that came with Israel, this mixed company, they became part of Israel. They were still Gentiles. They weren't Jewish, but they were still Gentiles who became part of Israel. And that's God's plan for both Israel and the nations. And that's why it says in Zechariah 8:23 that the 10 men from the nations, they will grab hold of the corner of a Jewish man's garment, which is the tzitzit, the Torah, and say, we want to go with you, for we've heard that God is with you. 10 is a congregation, a minimum for a congregation of nations, of people, minimum, whatever you want to call it, of people, the nations who will take hold of God's Torah, who have a circumcised heart. God will be doing the circumcision that was without hands, the spiritual circumcision. And that's even what God was talking to Peter about with the lowering of the sheet and the unclean animals and stuff. Had nothing to do with food, because we find that out later, but it had to do with Gentiles who had circumcised hearts, Gentiles who worship God, God-fearers. Cornelius is what we refer to as a God-fearer. He didn't convert to Judaism. He didn't become Jewish. He remained who he was, but he worshiped the God of Israel, him and his household, and even his servants. And that's when Peter went there, because he was told to go there, follow him. That's when he realized the meaning of that vision, not to call Gentiles unclean who God has declared as clean. They may not be Jewish, but they still worship God, and they have uncircumcised hearts. That's what God has always been looking for Gentiles and Jews, not just the physical circumcision. Anybody can be circumcised, but it's the circumcision of the heart that God looks for. Okay? That's the sign. The physical sign is for Israel, but the spiritual sign is for all those who follow God, whether you're Jewish or Gentile, who follow the Torah. For the Gentiles, the parts of the Torah that refer to them that they need to. For the Jews, they keep the Torah that is significant for them. And no, we don't have to be perfect at it. We do make mistakes. But the Torah itself doesn't save us. It just leads and guides us in the direction and shows us the pictures of Yeshua, the Messiah, right? The Redeemer, the second Redeemer. Moses was the first, Yeshua was the second. There's other Redeemers, but they're nothing like Moses and Yeshua, right? We do know that. And so the death of the firstborn come, and Egypt kicks them out. Egypt, the world kicks them out. They want nothing to do with you anymore. Well, Egypt is still there, right? And we're going to read about this because in the next chapter, we see that Pharaoh comes after, the next portion, Pharaoh comes after Israel. And what did I do that for? Who's going to make my pancakes? You know, who's going to make my next meal? Who's going to give me my wine? You know, he's whining, right? Okay. We look at that as the final battle. It's a picture of Armageddon. All of Pharaoh's troops, his chariots, everything goes after Moses and the Israelites, right? And we see that in the end too, that the world is going to do the same thing. And it's after that what happens? Israel goes through the Sea of Reeds, right? In essence, a baptism from death to life, the promised land, the journey that we go on, right? And the earth is destroyed. And so what happens at Armageddon? After Armageddon comes the world to come, the world after the Messianic era, right? In essence, with Moses and stuff in the wilderness, that was kind of a Messianic era, right? But then comes the final battle. They take possession. And comes the world to come, the world, the 8th day. See, the 7th day is going to be the Sabbath, be the Messianic era. The 8th day is new beginnings, where we enter the new world, the promised land, you might say. That's what we get to look forward to. But first, we got to make it to the Messianic era, right? We got to make it to the Messianic era. And part of that is studying God's word, learning to walk in his ways, to be a light. And it's tough in this world, we know it. But we gotta stand strong. Just as Rav Shaul, Paul was even talking about the armor of God, having all these things, and in the end to be able to stand, right? God has given us all the tools we need. We just have to acknowledge it and put them to work. So as we go this week, Let's think about it, you know. Let's pray for ICE and law enforcement, stuff like that, but also pray for the people who are demonstrating, because they are pawns of the adversary. They're pawns of the adversary. They do not know what they do. Just like Yeshua said when he was hanging on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, right? These people don't really know what they're doing. They're just part of the crowd. They want to be accepted. They want to be rebellious, which rebellion is like the sin of witchcraft, right? But pray for them too. We all need prayer. We all need to lift them up. Pray for the peace, not just of Israel, but importantly for Israel, but for our own country, for our own state. And also that the corrupt leaders in this state get out of the way to let a legitimate government come in and rectify the mistakes that have been made. That's what we need. Pray for our leaders, yes. And that's what we should be doing. So, all right, bow your heads for the priestly blessing. Our God and God of our fathers, bless us with a threefold blessing in the Torah written by the hand of Moses, your servant, and pronounced by Aaron and his sons, the priests, your holy people, as it is said. May the Lord bless you and protect you, if you will. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you, if you will. May the Lord turn his face toward you and grant you peace, if you will. Yevarecha Adonai, v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha, v'chunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha, v'yasem lecha. Shalom. Go in shalom. Have a wonderful week. Shavuot. Shalom. Wonderful week. Tuesday night we have our Torah club at 7. Wednesday night we have our Wednesday night study. Tent of David by Boaz Michael. Wonderful book, especially for Gentiles, but for everybody, Jews and Gentiles alike. It's eye-opening. It's really good. So remember that. Keep us all up in prayer. Everybody stay warm, especially here in Minnesota and other places that it's getting cold. I got this big storm coming through, so people, if you don't have to be out and about, don't. Stay home. Be safe. Make sure you hug. Yeah, hug your kids. Hug your parents. Hug your animals. Hug is a good thing to do. Right? So, anyways, I just want to say thank you, and please be warm and take to heart the things that God has for us. Okay. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. One more thing before we go. If you're looking for a place to come and worship and the Messianic aspect of things, move to Bemidji. Bemidji is a beautiful place, a wonderful place, and be a part of our congregation and a light to this community and beyond. I know a lot of people say, well, Minnesota's a left-wing state, whatever. Who cares? Northern Minnesota's better. It's beautiful. It's awesome, especially in the summertime with the lakes and fishing and everything. So, and yes, I love Bemidji. Bemidji is a great place. So it's a great place to raise your family and to be Jewish. So, shalom.